He's Frank Schwab. She's Jori Epstein. I'm Jason Fitz. You know the drill. It's inside coverage where we tell you the why and the how of all things that are happening in the NFL. By the way, I usually say this at the end. I will say it at the beginning. If you're listening to us right now, take a second, rate, subscribe, review, do all of those things. It helps the podcast a lot. It's meaningful to us, especially now that we are on our own channel. So get out there and make sure you get us all of those little happy ratings and reviews, just because it makes Frank smile. And anytime Frank smiles, everybody smiles. See, look at that. We got a Frank smile early on in the episode, Frank. We feeling good, Frank?
Why wouldn't I be smiling? My Commanders are coming off a huge win, 2-1. I've been down with the Commanders from day one. I've been down with them from day one. Yes. Wow. It is funny. Like, my friend did send me, he was Googling my name. He's a buddy from college. Shout out to Jesse. He's Googling my name.
Jesse.
And the picture that comes up for Frank Schwab journalist is actually Dan Quinn at a media conference. Yes, you could look at us all, I guess, graying, bald, white dudes with goatees look alike. I guess that's where we're going with this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it must make sense.
Wait, you just found your Halloween costume. Don't sleep on that. Like, goes Dan Quinn. Like, there we go.
Oh, I could do the backwards hat. Yeah. That's great.
Come on.
Yeah,
like,
that's easy too.
I love all of this. That's spectacular. Yes, your Commanders, by the way, and sneaky, quietly reminded us in the group text of your Commanders' success, by the way. Not for nothing, though. It's rare that I've been right this season about anything. I did call the breakout game for Jayden Daniels, so I feel like, I rode the Frank train to success.
Something.
Jori, did you
I didn't expect that
day
day 3. I'll tell you that. Jayden Daniels. Oh my goodness, that was awesome.
Wait, Fitz, when did you call the Jayden Daniels breakout?
Yeah, when was this exactly? I don't really remember.
I was asked to make a
this.
bold fantasy prediction on FFL on Sunday. And my bold fantasy prediction was that in a loss, so that part was wrong, but let's not get buried with details here, Jayden Daniels would have a breakout game, and it would include some throwing touchdowns as well. As I think, look, we didn't plan on this conversation, but I think it is worth noting Cliff Kingsbury's doing a really stinking good job opening this offense like a flower for Jayden Daniels.
No, I think it's such a good point, because when I look at the difference between Caleb Williams in Chicago and Jayden Daniels in Washington, there's several reasons that things are going a little bit differently for them. And I think some of that is the quarterback, some of that is the personnel group, and some of that is the coaching. And I feel like Washington has really allowed Jayden to come along gradually. And I know that Bengals cornerback Cam Taylor-Britt caught some heat after he said they're running a college offense and not asking Jayden to do much. But I think Aaron Rodgers talked about this as well with the Jets and kind of what he was doing when he was first coming back from his Achilles week 1 and 2. And you actually kind of want your offense to gradually progress over the weeks, especially if you're a rookie quarterback or you're coming back from injury. And I think that Washington has brought Jayden Daniels along really well. And this week was really an illustration of how much they trust his arm, how much they trust Terry McLaurin on the other side, and how much they trust just that cast around him, the offensive line protecting him. And all of that really comes back to Cliff Kingsbury calling the plays and designing these plays against the defense.
I just kind of feel like, and also completely true. I mean, I was kind of critical first couple of weeks that they were so conservative on offense and Jayden Daniels just throwing screen passes. But now, as we sit here, they did open things up. That pass to Terry McLaurin that sealed the game was just unbelievable. He stood in, took the hit, and just delivered an absolute dime. Unbelievable. And I'm starting to wonder if Jayden Daniels is going to become the story of this entire season. And this season that's so up and down so far. Nobody's good. Nobody's really that bad either. We'll talk about that. But the one thing that stood out is this rookie quarterback is just awesome. I mean, 20 of 22 or whatever, 21, 23, whatever he ended up, just an unbelievable performance.
The record for most, for the highest completion percentage of rookie
that's
quarterbacks.
Unbelievable. I mean, to wit, like Scott Pianowski, our colleague on the fantasy side, put together a league. We wanted to draft after 3 weeks to kind of see what's different. And it's a super flex league, so you can play 2 quarterbacks. Jayden Daniels went 8th overall. Like, that's how much, like, he's just taken off and everybody is on board on this bandwagon. It's so fun to see. He's a fun player. He's multi-talented. And it just feels, I get this is such a lazy comparison, but it feels so much like RG3 in 2012, where he was such a huge story that season, except this is happening in like week 3. He's already arrived. Like, I just can't wait to watch Jayden Daniels play again. Like, that's how good he was on Monday night and how excited I am just for this whole, just to see this guy's rookie season kind of unfold.
When Aaron Rodgers talked yesterday about Jayden Daniels, obviously Rodgers talks about a lot of things, but I really value what he says about quarterbacking across the league because he's been doing this at such a high level for such a long time. And he said what he loved about Jayden is just the way he hung in the pocket and really played from the pocket, and how if you want to last in this league for a long time, that's what you got to do. Because there are absolutely some plays, if you go back and watch, that Jayden could have escaped. He's got great athleticism, great ability to run, or even just extend the plays and throw outside of structure, and he could have been successful, but that's not actually what you want to do in the long term. That's not actually what's best for the team over the course of the game. And so when you look at the Jayden to Terry McLaurin pass, for example, that was one where, he knew the guy was coming. He could have tried to escape the big hit, and he didn't. And the other thing that Rodgers talked about was just that pass to Terry McLaurin toward the end. Like, Jayden is throwing that as Terry's kind of doing that stutter. He's throwing it way before. So when we see that accuracy, that's why I sometimes forget. Like, it looks like a dime. He dropped it right in the bucket. But it's not like he's throwing it when his guy is already there. He has to anticipate so much where Terry McLaurin is going to be while a guy is coming to hit him. And to have the poise and the arm talent, really. And when I went to Washington in June and sat down with Dan Quinn, he said, we view him as a dual threat quarterback, but a passer first. And I feel like this game plan really reflected that.
And one real quick thing. We haven't talked enough about Jayden Daniels' toughness. We always talk about, he's going to take too many hits. He doesn't slide. There were so many times in this game where he needed, like it was a third and whatever, and he needs to run, and he does run, and he takes a hit, and he pops right back up. Or the play where he throws to McLaurin and he knows he's going to get blasted. He just pops right back up. We've talked so much about he needs to slide. He needs to protect himself. He needs to do this and that. For a guy who is 205, 210, whatever he is, he's a tough dude. I'm impressed with his toughness already. I don't know that he can last with this many hits, but I'm impressed with how he just keeps bouncing back up time and time again.
Standing in the pocket, delivering a really accurate ball, using his athleticism when he needs to, with a really efficient rookie season, with a team that might surprise people. We are describing CJ Stroud and the Texans, right? Like, I know we want to make that happen every year, and that's really unlikely, but it does feel like some of the things that we love about CJ Stroud in his rookie year that translated to the pros are translating for Jayden as well. All right, so from positive, I'm glad we started with the positive, because why not feel good about things? From the positive, let's go to the negative and the panic meter. Now, it'd be easy to do a panic meter for a team that sucks, like, I don't know, my beloved Raiders. But instead, we're going to do the panic meter on a couple of teams here that really, the sky feels like it might be falling, and I need some expertise from you guys on whether or not we're overreacting. Because I would argue right now, if you are the Jacksonville Jaguars, this is catastrophic. The start to the season for the Jacksonville Jaguars is absolutely catastrophic. And here's my question. When are we going to be allowed to critique Trevor Lawrence? Like, seriously, I know how good he was in college. I know what we expected from him. The Jags aren't very good right now. They don't look very good. We've seen multiple head coaches. Doug Peterson was supposed to be the answer to this. Like, Jori, what is how worried should we be about the Jags, and when can we start to freak out about Trevor?
I think it's a great question, because I think we all just kind of assume, well, Trevor Lawrence will always be this generational talent. And I'm not saying he's not, but it is pretty amazing that this is not his first year. This is not his first year with a non-Urban Meyer coach. Like, we're several years into this thing, and he's got a new contract already. And we really still have a lot of questions. I thought the broadcast put it well when they talked about how he was chasing perfection rather than progress. And when you look at the way his feet are in the pocket, he's not settled. But I think I really struggle to understand, like, is this a coaching element? Is this a scheme element? Obviously, he's really trying to make good by the draft status and the contract. But what do you guys think is the number one issue facing Trevor Lawrence that is keeping him from having the success?
I don't think he's as accurate as we thought he would be. And it's just, there's just something missing. I don't even know what it is. Maybe it's pressing a little bit. And yes, the Hive will all tell you, just watch the film on Trevor Lawrence. It's all of his teammates' fault and his offensive line and the scheme and the receivers. And I get that. He hasn't been put in a perfect situation by any means. But you're the dude making $55 million a year. Like, it's got to happen. And, I didn't even realize on Monday night that it was DeMar Hamlin who intercepted that pass, because I was just apoplectic on my, it was an awesome play, but in retrospect, but I was just apoplectic on my couch, like, oh my God, Trevor Lawrence, what are you doing on that play? He whistled it like 10 feet over his receiver's head. It's just one of the worst passes you're going to see. He had a clean pocket. That wasn't it. So at some point, you just can't blame everything else around Trevor Lawrence. It's either you are that dude or you're not, and he's not. The Jaguars, like, where do you go from here? I had a serious thought in my mind, and a lot of people expressed this on Twitter, so it wasn't just me, but Does Doug Peterson get fired tomorrow? Like, that's how bad that loss was. You're 0-3. You're going nowhere. You just got absolutely embarrassed at home by the Buffalo Bills. And if Shad Khan paid any attention to his football team, maybe he would have gotten fired on Tuesday. That's how bad it is already for the Jaguars. I honestly, I still think there's talent there. They were a good football team last year before Trevor got hurt. But you're in such a hole now that I don't know that they can get out of this, really. And I'm not sure Doug Peterson survives until Halloween if this thing doesn't turn around pretty quick.
I don't want to oversimplify, but I do feel like there's a level to me when a guy gets paid. When a guy gets paid epic money, when we play the schedule game every year where you look at it and say, got a tough game, that guy that's getting paid, you should look at it and be like, oh man, we got to take on that guy. We got to take on that offense. We got to take on that quarterback. Who in the NFL right now is running scared of having to take on Trevor Lawrence? And I get that we want to put all of these reasons behind it, but at some point, we sit here with every other quarterback and we talk about the seesaw, the teeter-totter, like when will the quarterback lift up the talent around him? With every other quarterback, when does the quarterback lift up the coaches that are around him? Like, we have these great expectations. And with Trevor, it feels like we fell so in love with him in college that we refuse to allow his pro career to be what his pro career has been, which is just somewhat mediocre football. Like, Trevor give it, then Trevor take it away. Like, there isn't this huge level of dominance from Trevor Lawrence. And people keep wanting to excuse that. I look at it and say, at what point, once you gave him that kind of money, the whole league should say, man, you got that dude. I don't think anybody's scared of him right now, Jori. So I feel like the conversation has to change about the Jags and about Trevor Lawrence. We have to take a more realistic tone to who they are today.
Right. When you think about what Sam Darnold's doing now in Minnesota compared to what he did in New York at the beginning, I feel like there's this element of if Trevor Lawrence were with the Jets, the Giants, some sort of big market team, we would be having a very different conversation about how his career has gone. And like you guys said, he got that contract. And I think that he has had flashes of greatness in the NFL, particularly in that one playoff run that they had, and that ability to come back. And I think that gave the Jaguars this belief of like, if we let him go, are we really going to find someone better? And if we're not, and we don't want to let him go, then we have to pay him, because as we know, that is how the market works with the supply and demand. But once you do that, you say, okay, the two biggest people influencing the offense, or let's go three, head coach, offensive coordinator, and quarterback. And when the head coach is calling the plays, you kind of eliminate the middle man there. I think that what you say is, well, if you pay the quarterback and you need a change, now you have one place to look. You have two places to look. And so that's when you get into Doug Peterson's job security. It's not just that they're struggling. It's not just that they're struggling on national television. It's also that this offense is clearly broken and you've decided your quarterback is the answer. So you need to figure out where the problem is. And then it becomes a head coach situation.
I real quick, I don't know if you guys have an answer to this, but why is he so defended by everybody? I'm sure like Stone, our great producer, might cut one of these clips about us ripping Trevor Lawrence a little bit, and it'll go up on social media, and half the comments will be, you guys don't even know ball. If you watched, you would realize it's all these things other than Trevor Lawrence that's at fault. And Trevor might not be that Justin Herbert level of Teflon where you just can't rip him because everybody will defend Justin Herbert no matter what. But there's this hive of people who just won't admit that Trevor Lawrence hasn't been good. They want him to be good so badly, and I can't figure it out. We rip every other quarterback except Justin Herbert, but yet Trevor gets a complete pass from some people where if you try to be critical about Trevor Lawrence's game, people will come after you. Like, you are an idiot for even thinking to rip Trevor Lawrence. How dare you? When he's just been mediocre. He is not living up to this contract by any means. You touched on it, Jori. They paid him because, like, what are you going to do? Start over? You almost have to hope. You have to just hope that he's going to become that dude, because starting over after you draft this generational prospect would be so devastating for your franchise, for your fan base, for everything, that you just pay him and hope. And right now, that hope is not paying off. That gamble's not looking very good. And that's because Trevor Lawrence has been mediocre, no matter what some of his defenders will say.
I think part of that, though, there's two reasons. One, I remember being on the field his freshman year at Clemson, covering it. And people at the time were saying he should sue the NFL to have the right to come into the league after 1 year of college football because he was going to be better than Elway. You can't have that level of hype for years that just transcends the sport and not have it ingrained in people's brains, even if it's subconsciously when you get to the NFL draft. And the other part of it is, this is the Jags. Like, I honestly believe that if he had been drafted by Green Bay and was every bit as mediocre, we wouldn't give him this benefit of the doubt. If he'd been drafted...
by Green Bay, he wouldn't have played for the first 2 years, so we wouldn't have known what he was going to do.
But if he had been drafted by a franchise that gets any benefit of the doubt to how they develop a quarterback, there would be less forgiveness for Trevor Lawrence. People still just automatically assign the Jags as the team that decided to pay Blake Bortles, and how stupid does that look? Like, I don't think the Jags as a franchise get a lot of grace from most fans. The presumption is going to be if something goes wrong in Jacksonville, it must be the Jags' fault. And frankly, they've earned part of that. I do think they've earned it. I do think it's interesting, though, that we have to turn this into either or instead of both. Like, this to me, everybody's failing now. The Jags failed Trevor Lawrence by hiring Urban Meyer. I agree with that. They hired a quarterback whisperer that's supposed to be able to fix that. Now Trevor Lawrence is failing the Jags. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think both have failed each other. And now you have this dysfunctional relationship that doesn't work, and a quarterback that is mediocre, a quarterback that's mid on a franchise that's irrelevant. That is difficult for everybody to swallow.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an element of, because Carson Wentz played really well for a while and then tapered off, that people say, okay, well, Doug Peterson, we've seen this with him before?
That's probably fair. How much of that is on Doug Peterson and how much of that is on Carson Wentz? I mean, you talk to anybody around Philly and they'll tell you that Carson Wentz was virtually uncoachable on some of the things that he did. And so, I think, again, this is where the only knowledge that we have is what we see on Sundays. And the hardest part of this is, like, that's where people like Jori and C-Rob and Frank, I think, are so important to people like me, because you guys are talking to people around the league, right? Like, as writers, you're talking to more people that are connected. As someone just watching Carson Wentz fail, I'm looking at it and saying, well, how's this happen? I think Carson shares a lot of the blame on that. So maybe Trevor Lawrence is Carson Wentz. Like, maybe part of this is coaching and part of this is that he's just not that coachable. I don't know.
It's a mystery, because he should be better than this. And he has shown flashes. Somebody tweeted at me like, oh, he's never been good. No, he has. He was 2 years ago, the second half of the season. He looked like a top 5 quarterback. Where's that guy? Why did he disappear? Go back and watch the Cowboys game, the one they won in overtime on the pick 6. He was awesome in that game. Like, he was legitimately like, whoa, Trevor Lawrence has arrived. I was talking last year about Trevor Lawrence could win MVP based on how he finished the season before. And it has just disappeared. And it can't all be the guys around him. They used a first-round pick on Brian Thomas. They went out and spent a bunch of money on Christian Kirk. They have invested in the offensive line. They have gone out and got a quarterback whisperer, as you said, with Doug Peterson, supposedly. Like, it's not like he's got the worst situation we've ever seen in the NFL. It's not great, but it's also not the worst he could possibly have. It's still the results aren't there, and it's a results business, and he's far enough along in his career now where we should be seeing more results.
So let's look at another team then that right now people are cautious to panic about, and it's the Cincinnati Bengals. And I understand cautious, like, there's a fine line here, right? Because the Bengals start slow every year is the narrative. What I can't figure out is this just another year of Cincinnati starting slow, or are the Bengals actually not very good? Because the Bengals losing, we opened the show talking about the Commanders here, but the Bengals have some real problems. They have real issues on the defensive side of the ball, and they're forcing their offense to be superhuman, Frank, every week. Like, how panicked are you about the Bengals right now?
Very much so. And, I get a lot wrong in the offseason, in the preseason. I'll take those L's, but I'll also victory lap here and there. Go back and read my preview on the Bengals. And I basically said, look, everybody just wants to say, like, oh, Joe Burrow got hurt. That's why the Bengals didn't make the playoffs. They're going to be a Super Bowl contender again. When if you look at that team last year, there were a lot of things under the hood that were bad except for Joe Burrow. And the main thing being the defense giving up way too many big plays. And people got on me. Oh, how dare you? They're going to be great. Joe Burrow's back. You don't know what you're talking about. And now what happens? You come back and the defense is awful. Like, they're legitimately bad. And I don't know how this gets fixed. I get that they got a lot of injuries up front. Very, very true. But the Washington Commanders came in and they did not have an unsuccessful drive the entire night. The only 2 times the Bengals stopped them was when they took a knee for one play at the end of the first half and when they took a knee at the end of the second half to win the game. Like, that's it. That's the only time that they kept the Washington Commanders of all teams off the board. And I get Jayden played great, but a lot of that was the Bengals defense too. I don't think this really gets fixed. I don't think the offense has been that great. It's been good, and getting T. Higgins back helps. I don't think the Bengals are going 5-12 or anything, but this doesn't look like a playoff team to me. I don't think they make the playoffs in a really tough division. I think that they're stuck. And I think a lot of the same issues that popped up last year that people wanted to ignore because they just wanted to say, oh, it's Joe Burrow and that's it. No, there were issues that really never got fixed in the offseason.
Right. I mean, when we look at what the Bengals did against the Chiefs, they really took them down to the wire, and that gives us hope. But they've also fared better against the Chiefs defensively than they have against most teams through the years. And yes, they've had slow starts, but 2021, they started 2-1. 2022, they lost their first two, but they didn't lose three. 2021, they also went 1-3, but not 0-3. And when you look at teams that have gone 0-3 since 1979, just 6 teams have made the playoffs, and just one since 2000, which I think is relevant not just because of recency bias, but also because we've seen the game change in the way it's played, in the way of the structure and all of that. And none of those teams have won a Super Bowl, which is a bummer for people like me who picked the Bengals to win the Super Bowl in our preseason preview. But I think when you look at it, what makes me most concerned is that Joe Burrow and the offense looked good on Monday night, and they still lost to Jayden Daniels and like this Commanders team that's really early. And if you were to tell me, well, the Bengals are playing a bunch of like young defenders who need to figure it out, and they just had like an off game and they were fooled, I would maybe be a little more encouraged about their ability to improve. But when I went through the Bengals for training camp, they were like, look, we got Von Bell back. We got Geno Stone in the building. Like, we have the guys to anchor our defense and make sure we're not missing assignments. And that's not what it looked like against a rookie quarterback playing in his 3rd ever NFL game. And so I think that if you have a team where the offense cannot overcome its defense against a team like the Commanders, like you guys said, they're not going to have a walk in the park through the division. And I think even if they're competitive through the year, I don't think that they are going to make the playoffs.
But if they don't make the playoffs, we are talking, guys, about a massive level of failure because of the way they wrote their business plan. They elected not to trade T. Higgins, right? T. Higgins is still a member of the Cincinnati Bengals. They have not yet paid Jamar Chase. And now you got to look at it and say, well, shoot, if you weren't going to make the playoffs, you should have at least gone around and tried to get something for Higgins while you could. And also, can you even afford to allocate the resources you need to an offense if that offense being great doesn't win you football games? Like, now all of a sudden I'm looking around saying, what is the path for the Bengals? Like, if they've spent so much time being just almost good enough to take down the Chiefs, and now all of a sudden it feels like the sky is sort of falling because they are bad defensively, and that defense can't stop anybody. So now the offense has to be superhuman. And even with superhuman offensive production, they're still 0-3. The Bengals missing the playoffs would be an abject disaster for NFL teams when you look at bad business planning, bad understanding of who you are, bad execution. Like, it's bad everything, Frank.
This is way too much down narrative street, probably, because Jamar Chase's unhappiness with his contract isn't why the Bengals got no pressure on Jayden Daniels all game. I get that, but the vibes have been bad for the Bengals from the beginning, and part of it is because everybody is sitting there saying, why is Jamar Chase getting paid? Like, this is easy. This is an easy contract to figure out. Like, pay him his $35 million. What are we doing here? Where Mike Brown kind of went back into his whole cheap mode, and he's like, I'm not going to negotiate during the season. And they're like, and now it just gets off to a bad start. T. Higgins isn't particularly happy on the franchise tag, I assume. Everybody wanted to see Jamar Chase get paid because, from all accounts, teammates like him, and he's obviously a great player. He didn't get paid. Now, all of a sudden, you have this hanging over your head to start the season. And I'm not saying, like, that's the reason they're 0-3. But it certainly didn't help. It certainly didn't help the vibes around Cincinnati when you have an unhappy superstar who should have gotten paid. Like, every other team figures it out, but the Bengals couldn't. And that, I think, seeps into your locker room a little bit. And people say, boy, if Jamar freaking Chase can't get paid, what chance do I have? Like, if he's not going to be valued, am I going to be valued? I just think it's been bad vibes for Cincinnati since the beginning of the season.
I guess I would ask, like, okay, so with their defensive line, Sheldon Rankins was out this week with a hamstring. BJ Hill was out this week with a hamstring. They've got some guys coming back. Do we feel like if that defensive line does get back to healthy, I think edge rusher Myles Murphy's got a knee. He's coming off IR potentially soon. If those guys get back, is that going to be enough for the Russian cover to work in tandem, their defense to do enough? Because the defense doesn't have to be great. It just has to be like solid enough to hold off as Joe Burrow goes and runs up the scoreboard. So do we think that that could be a turning point, or does it seem like it's going to be too late?
Oh, I think it'll help. But that's the thing. It's like, you got to go, what do you got to go the rest of the way? 10-4 to even be a wild card contention? Like, yes, they'll be better. I think the defensive line injuries are a serious thing. Like, that's why they couldn't get pressure. I get that. But now you've dug yourself such a big hole. Like Fitz talked about the stat. One playoff team that's been 0-3 since 2000. Like, you're in such a hole. You almost have to win 6, 7, 8 straight games to be relevant again. And I'm not sure the Bengals could do that even with an improved defensive line.
I'm looking at their schedule now. They still have, just looking at games that could be moderately tough. They still have the Ravens twice. They still have the Eagles. They still have the Cowboys. They have a Steelers defense that's been very tough. We all know that to take on a couple of times. But they do have winnable football games. Like, as much as it hurts my heart to say that. They have the Panthers. They have the Raiders. That's why it hurts my heart. They have the Giants. Like, they've got some winnable football games in front of them.
But Fitz, you know what was a winnable football game? The Patriots in week 1. You know what was a winnable football game? The Commanders in week 3. Like,
no, you're right. You're right.
Those are two spots on your schedule that you say, we need to win that. We need to win that because we're probably not winning at Arrowhead. And they blew both games. Like, they've put themselves in a really, really, really bad spot here.
I would like to give Fitz for some credit, though, as a Raiders fan, for not calling the Ravens a winnable game after his Raiders beat them.
No, that's because the Ravens looked back at the film like the rest of us did and said, maybe we should run the football and we'll just win. If they run the football in the fourth quarter, they'd have beaten the Raiders. They ran the football all over Dallas in a demoralizing win. Okay, we're going to pay some bills. When we come back, though, I like to be a beacon of light. I really do. I like to be a beacon of light. But all this quarterback conversation has me thinking, maybe the light at the end of the tunnel, known as first overall picks in the draft, isn't as helpful as you think it is. We'll explain what we mean next when we come back. I feel like every year is a suck for this person, tank for Tua, whatever it is. It's like, they'll find some alliterative way to tell you that you need the first overall pick in the draft. And we've been talking about a couple of teams already in this show with the Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence that, look, these are teams that are good, but they're not where they wanted to be the minute they had the opportunity to draft transcendent talent. And that, guys, has me going down a rabbit hole that people aren't going to like. Everybody wants to feel like there's hope. That's why everybody wants to suck. You guys know how much I love the NFL draft. The concept is, if we have the first overall pick, we're going to be great. Well, what are we seeing right now? Like, Caleb Williams is struggling. Jayden Daniels, not as much. Caleb Williams is struggling. This is a theme. Bryce Young struggled. We know what happened there. Like, if you turn around and look at this, Jori, this concept that I'm going to pick first overall and that's going to fix everything actually doesn't fix anything for most teams.
Yeah, I think you have to ask yourself, first of all, what are you asking the quarterback to do? Because 20, 30 years ago, we were not asking these guys necessarily to come in and play right away, much less to carry the team right away. And then you have to say, what's being put around them? Like, I think we all thought that Chicago was supporting Caleb so well by getting him a bunch of weapons, when maybe Washington supported Jayden better by getting him an offensive line that seems a lot more sound than what they've got in Chicago. But I do look around the league and I'm like, Trevor Lawrence, first overall pick, as we mentioned, that's years later. Baker Mayfield is finding it now, but how many teams did he have to go through to get there? I mean, Joe Burrow, it's like, well, he's a first overall pick who's playing great, but is that enough to win? And then we've got Kyler Murray, who I think is showing why he was the first overall pick. And he's interesting compared to Bryce Young because they're both on the smaller side, or at least on the shorter side, I should say. But I definitely think there's this question of how much is the player, how much is the group around them, and how much is the infrastructure put in place. And I know that the Patriots didn't have the first overall pick, they had the third, but I did talk to a lot of people when I went through training camp, and they look at what happened with Mac Jones and how they want to be different with Drake May. And they really said, like, we realize that we have to support a first round quarterback differently than we did with Mac Jones, in whether that's how they bring him along from an off-field standpoint or how they bring him along from an on-field standpoint. Now, hypocrisy aside, because they did put him in to get bashed at the end of last game, but that's another story.
I mean, I think part of this has to be that if you're a team drafting first, there's probably a reason you're drafting first. And you think about some of the franchises that have failed these number one overall picks. Bears haven't had a good quarterback since 1950. That was the last time they had a first team all-pro quarterback. Panthers, of course, the Cardinals. I mean, we're talking about teams that pretty much always lose. And that's kind of what's happening. And Fitz, you were reading off the list of number one overall picks before we started taping. And it's like, there's 4 home runs this century? We're talking about 25 picks since 2000. And Caleb Williams is probably good. I still think he's going to turn into that. But you're talking about like Eli Manning, Myles Garrett, and Matthew Stafford, who didn't even win with the Lions. And just teams that constantly are just losing, and they bring these players in and just kind of take a step back and say, okay, Caleb, save us. And he throws 52 passes when that's absolutely ridiculous for a third game of a guy's career. It's a lot on these franchises that are drafting first, that they just can't support these number one overall picks. And some guys have just failed because they fail. And some guys shouldn't have been first overall picks to begin with. It was just a weak draft or whatever, and it happens. But you look back, and I think it's a lot of, if we're talking about nature versus nurture, I mean, a lot of this is just you're sticking these guys into bad situations and expecting them to turn it around when the Jacksonville Jaguars are maybe just always going to be bad.
Yeah, I think we have to stress here that a quarterback can only do so much on the field. The quarterback doesn't do everything off the field, too. And bad organizations are bad for a reason. Your point is a really good one here, Frank, because if you look back at the list, and here's the caveat I would say. When I say these names, how many of them truly took the team they were drafted by to epic heights they had never seen before, right? So if you look over the last few years, we'll see with Caleb, but Bryce Young, Trayvon Walker, yes, he's still in the league. Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, we'll see. Baker Mayfield certainly didn't do it with Cleveland. Myles Garrett has been an incredible player. Absolutely. So he's one of the rare ones here. Jared Goff didn't do it with the Rams to the level that everybody wanted. Maybe you could say Goff, he did win a Super Bowl there, even if he was traded. Winston, Jadeveon Clowney, Eric Fisher, Andrew Luck retires, Cam Newton, yeah. Sam Bradford, Matt Stafford, Jake Long, Jamarcus Russell, Mario Williams, Alex Smith. Like, this list goes on and on and on. And when you start looking at it, I think the problem is fans want a quick fix. And I keep using this analogy in all of sports, but I'll use it here, use it with college football. Fans want Ozempic. Like, football fans want an injection they can take that's suddenly going to give them tremendous results that gets them everything they want. If you want to build a sustainable winner, you do not do that by taking an injection. You do that by changing your habits, all of your habits. Like, if you want to lose weight and keep weight off for the rest of your life, you got to work out, you got to eat right, you got to change what you're doing, you got to get new habits, you got to become sort of a different person in the way you live every day. That's the way football needs to be looked at sometimes. Like, we've got to stop looking at it like, I'm going to plug this quarterback in and all of a sudden we're going to win a Super Bowl. No, like, you need a GM, you need a head coach, you need an offensive coordinator that knows their head from a hole in the ground. Like, there are so many other parts to it. I just think the first overall pick concept is, at some level, just wild oversimplification of what it actually takes to win football games.
But I also think it's interesting because I know we were all last week like, how could the Carolina Panthers possibly bench Bryce Young, et cetera, et cetera? And I actually think that this is why Dave Canales, like, you got to give him some credit. Obviously, we see what Andy Dalton did this week with coming in Bryce's place. But I also think that maybe some of these teams say, okay, we think we're ready for it. Let's try it out. Like, you want to give the guy a chance to succeed and prove that he is ready and that the team is ready. And then these teams aren't ready and they just keep going and going and going. And if they don't ruin a quarterback's career, they at least ruin the quarterback's career with that franchise. So maybe there's an argument of like, hey, if it's not working, I understand that there's a confidence hit that you're going to take for the player and for the team toward the player. But I do think that there's this element of like, I don't think the Panthers are like, we're done with Bryce Young forever, but I think they're saying it's not working right now. It might be a sunk cost, but why don't we give ourselves a chance for a reset? Why don't we try and build up everything around him that we probably should have done a year and a half ago, but we didn't? Why don't we just try and like give him a little bit of time to figure out what he needs to do and what we need to do to support him, to build him up? And then again, Andy Dalton's not under contract after this year. We'll have a better sense of where our team is, where Bryce is, and whether that could be a fix. So like, I actually think that while I'm not trying to give David Tepper credit that I'm not positive he deserves, I do think that from a coaching standpoint, it feels like there is an adult in the room in Carolina right now, and we'll see if that works. But I understand the philosophy in light of how often we ruin first overall picks.
Yeah, is it as easy as just sitting a guy? Because I've been off of the bandwagon of, oh, you got to sit and learn, the Carson Palmer way of sitting for a year. But now I'm almost rethinking about it because there's been so many guys that fail in these spots. And again, you're going to the first overall pick, you're going to a bad situation, almost definitely, because you're going to be a bad team if you're picking first overall. And maybe it would help these guys to sit a little bit. And it's so prehistoric almost. I mean, when Carson Palmer did this, like, we were watching tube TVs still, right? Like, it was like the 19-inch TV was a big TV. But that's how long ago this was. It seems like generations ago when it's like, no, the first overall pick will not play for a year. When you draft somebody first overall, like a Bryce Young, you're expecting them to come in right away and energize a fan base and energize the organization, when maybe it would be better for him to sit for a year behind whoever their backup would be. And not that they could have pulled this off, but maybe it would have been better for the Bears to sit Caleb Williams for a year behind Justin Fields. You only got 6th-round pick back for him. Not like you're missing anything there. So, but I just wonder if maybe teams are going to rethink things when you do draft a guy number 1 overall. It's been a long time since teams were patient with the number 1 overall pick, because you see the success of a Joe Burrow right away or something like that, where maybe the Jordan Love model is going to work better. I don't know. I'm rethinking it because so many of these guys just come in and 2 years into it, they just look broken.
Which I think we should also not understate how much the Carolina Panthers are well aware that Sam Darnold is currently having success elsewhere and Baker Mayfield is currently having success elsewhere. And I think when we say like trade Bryce Young, they do not want to see the guy that they gave up all these picks for and drafted first overall go have success elsewhere the way that some of these other quarterbacks are. And it would be even more painful because the other guys weren't initially drafted by them. They just kind of came there along the way. But I really think that the Panthers are going to say, like, how can we avoid having another quarterback who came through here go succeed in spite of us rather than because of us?
So at what point then do the Chicago Bears look around and say, hey, we got to make sure we're protecting Caleb? Like, I'm not saying that Caleb Williams should be benched right now, but I am saying that whatever the Bears are doing isn't working. So you got to do something. Either you got to change the way you're pulling this offense together. You got to change what you're asking Caleb to do. You got to adjust your game plan, or you got to adjust your quarterback situation. And I'd rather admit quick that, hey, it's going to be better if we sit this for a little bit and try and figure some of these things out than watch Caleb Williams just get absolutely destroyed all year long. I mean, there is some element of, if we're looking at some of the damage that's done to these first overall picks and you're the Bears, at what point do you look around and say, hey, I don't care what happens this season. I don't want to do to Caleb what other teams have done to first overall picks.
Yeah, and I think it starts with coaching. We talked about this Sunday night when we went through every game that this is just not sustainable. This isn't smart by the Chicago Bears to drop him back 52 times. And we said that the week before after that Sunday night game of, you're putting too much on Caleb. He's developing bad habits, and nothing changed in week 3. And I think that's where it starts. I think that you can't go back. You can't bench him. That would be such a bad look and hurt his confidence and all. It's just not an option right now. But what is an option is, all right, we're never doing that again where he has to drop back 52 times. Like, that's just ridiculous.
I hear you that you can't bench him. If I ran the Chicago Bears today, I would fire the entire coaching staff. And as part of that, I would bench Caleb Williams. And I would make it very clear that I failed Caleb Williams. My coaches are failing Caleb Williams. And everybody in this building has failed Caleb Williams. So instead, we're going to bring people in right now that will make sure that we don't do any more harm to him while we figure out the right people to develop Caleb Williams. I hear you that it's a bad look to just bench your quarterback. I don't think this coaching staff has done anything to deserve any benefit of the doubt.
No, that's true. Their coaching staff is up. I couldn't even tell you the Bears' backup is at this moment, though. But you're also the Bears. You're sitting there saying, we have a lot of talent.
Then you clearly have no respect for Shepherd University.
That's true. Yeah. That is
the juggernaut
man would be their guy. But their defense is good. Their offense has got talent. You're 1-2. You're not giving up on anything. So I like your absolute blow everything up and start over again in week 4. But you're just not.
We are having a dramatic day here on.
No, I just did well. But this is biased completely by the fact that
Fitz firing everyone and benching the first overall pick.
Look,
I think a lot of this is just a matter of like reality versus our expectations. If this was happening in like Washington and Carolina and somewhere where we didn't think that Caleb had all the pieces around him, I don't think we would be so shocked that a first overall pick doesn't have perfect protection. I think that we might have convinced ourselves that Chicago had better pieces, particularly on the offensive line around him. Yeah. And I know I've talked to you guys about this, that when I went through the Bears in training camp and they were talking about their center battle, I'm like, center battle? Like, you need to know which center is working with your rookie quarterback like 2 months ago. You're not going to learn that much more. And I need to have that relationship be so solid because that's the guy who's going to get the rest of the offensive line in line. I also think, again, we cannot overstate, and there are a lot of people around the league who really believe this is an element of the problem, that Caleb wants to extend plays. He's trying to do that. That's what he did in college, and it worked for him. So he is not going to always cooperate, so to say, with what the offensive line is trying to do to protect him. And so part of this is the people around him, and part of this is Caleb saying, this is how I play football, this is what's made me great through my career. And he is going to have to learn kind of what Aaron Rodgers was saying about Jayden Daniels, how to hang in the pocket and how to really just try and take a little bit by little bit, if that means taking fewer hits. And I think we saw the CJ Stroud interaction with Caleb Williams after the game where he's like, stop taking those hits. And people questioned how well Caleb responded to that. But I think that CJ saw like, hey, you've got to be able to play this way at this level. Like, yes, Kyler Murray can escape to that, but Kyler Murray figures out how to work from the pocket as well.
And you know what's going to start to happen, and you kind of alluded to this, Jori, the same thing that happened last year, where we're going to look at number 1 pick, Caleb Williams is struggling, and say, did the Bears draft the wrong guy? because the number 2 pick is balling. And I don't know if that's going to continue all year. Who knows? Jayden Daniels is going to have his rough moments too because he's a rookie quarterback. But we are going down this road again of the pressure is going to start to ramp up on Caleb Williams because we're going to look at the guy drafted right behind him and say, well, this guy completed 91% of his passes right now on the road in Cincinnati. What's wrong with you, Caleb? Like, that's going to start to happen if Jayden keeps playing like this. To make no mistake about that.
And look, I'm the first to admit, I didn't like Eberflus keeping the job over the course of the summer, over the course of a new quarterback. Mm-hmm. I've been on record for that. I don't think Eberflus picked the right offensive coordinator for Caleb Williams. I've been on record for that. I think the part of the reason that I'm sitting here saying blowing it up is because I didn't come in with a lot of belief, and I haven't seen anything yet that changed my mind. All right, speaking of changing minds, we'll see if Frank got his mind changed about any of the power rankings. The power rankings are out. I can confirm one thing. The Raiders are not number 1. We'll find out who is and who's at the bottom next. All right, Frank, how are the Menchies doing? Your power rankings are out. Do you completely get off social media for a day? Do you clap back at any of these? Do you fire back at any point when people come at you for not appreciating where their team is ranked?
The good thing, like, I like people commenting because it forces me on Monday when I'm doing my rankings to actually think this through. Like, when I have the Bills number 1, which we're going to talk about, what am I going to say? How am I going to defend that? When I have this team over this team at number 15, some fan base is going to come after me saying, how dare you have the Falcons ahead of whoever? And I'll have to say, this is my reasoning for it. So it does. I don't respond to everybody because some get ridiculous and just, oh, you're a hater, whatever. I'm not. I don't really care more or less about any other team than anybody else. They're all 32 children to me. Trust me, I don't hate your favorite team. I'm not. I've had people say
children is a lot
32 children will be a lot of children. Trust me. But yes,
there's probably some players in the NFL that have done that. Go ahead.
I've had people be like, this guy must be from Boston. Like, I've spent like 4 days of my life in Boston. No, I'm not. No, that doesn't happen either. If you're seeing something in the power rankings, it's because I actually believe it, whether I'm right or wrong.
I just have issue with the guy that called me, you, and Charles a bunch of fat guys talking last week. I think
you're not fat anymore.
I'm
you're
155 pounds of pure power. Man. All right, my body fat's at 12.5%.
I'm still eating that cream of oatmeal every day.
It was fat with an F.
And like,
that could have been Jori.
If you're gonna come at us and call us fat, at least have the common decency as a human being to put a picture of yourself in there too. All right, let's just see. Let's see what you look like, because I'm just throwing a little shade. All right, Frank.
Yeah. Report your BMIs, sir.
There we go. I would like a full, like a live video with a newspaper up, so we know it's actually you and what day it is.
Body
like a hostage picture. Yeah.
Frank, number 1 team for you, Buffalo.
I put Buffalo over the Chiefs, and I want to know, am I wrong? Because I'm sitting there, maybe I'm recency biasing here, but the Bills have looked like the best team of football to me. And who have they beat? Well, I still do think the Jaguars have some talent. And clearly, it was a Dolphins win that really swayed me, because that was a Dolphins team with Tua. That's a playoff team. That's been a pretty good team with Mike McDaniel. They're not good anymore. I get that. Skylar Thompson, all that kind of stuff. But the Bills absolutely decimated the Dolphins. I'm like, that's very interesting. Didn't make the switch then, but then they absolutely just trashed the Jaguars. Well, whereas the Chiefs, look, when we get to the postseason, I get it. Patrick Mahomes turns on the magic. They're probably going to win. Fine. But right now, Chiefs barely beat the Ravens because Isaiah Likely was out of bounds. They barely beat the Bengals, an 0-3 Bengals team, because you got a DPI that rookie safety should never have been in that spot to begin with. And then week 3, like if a pass interference call is called to the end zone, Falcons might win that game. So it's not like the Chiefs are blowing the doors off of everybody right now. In this moment, right now, I believe the Buffalo Bills have been the best team in football. Do you guys agree with me?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the Chiefs are just not there yet. I still would not necessarily bet on the Bills against the Chiefs, particularly in the playoffs. I probably would in the regular season right now, but I think what we've seen for so many years is that obviously a transcendent quarterback is one of the most important things to really distinguish yourself from other teams in the NFL. And Josh Allen has produced like one for a long time, but his decision-making and his ball security has not always reflected that. And now, for the first time in his career in 7 seasons, he has not thrown an interception through 3 games. I understand that's not a massive sample size. I understand that it's 3 games, but last year he had 4 interceptions through 3 games. And they were kind of trying to figure out, well, this is the Josh Allen experience. He does a lot of things at a really high level, but then he makes some of these crazy mistakes. Well, now he's just doing the high level without the mistakes. And if he can continue continue that. He doesn't have to be perfect. He can throw some interceptions, but if he just continues to play more like this than he did the other way and to rely on guys like James Cook and some of his pieces, I do think that they should be the best team in football throughout the regular season at least.
So can I be a hypocrite and a fraud for a second? Because
why not?
I mean, why not? It's on brand for me. Like I'm going to put that on my business cards. Frank, I think you're right. Today, the Buffalo Bills are the best team in the NFL. If I had to bet your house, because I'm not betting mine, if I had to bet your house on the Bills-Chiefs neutral site playoff game today, I would bet on the Chiefs because I'm tired of being hurt.
Well, what
I
about
still
week
think the
4?
Bills are better.
What if they played a neutral site in Omaha, Nebraska in week 4?
I bet on the Bills in the regular season and the Chiefs in the playoffs.
I agree with that.
Then that's my tiebreaker with everything. When you see one team ahead of the other, my tiebreaker is always, okay, these two teams played on a neutral field tomorrow. Who would I pick? And right now, I pick the Bills over the Chiefs.
And on a neutral field, non-playoff game, I would too. But I'm a coward, and I will also admit that if it was a playoff game with any actual standing,
I get fraud it. And a coward. We have some self-deprecation.
You're just a hater. A hater.
I
need some positive affirmations from you, Fitz.
Did you see what the Raiders did on Sunday? You think there's anything positive between the Raiders on Sunday and UNLV football today? I have no idea what's happening in my life.
Oh my.
Okay, wow. So let's talk about movers and shakers. You got the Seahawks all the way up to numero 10.
I've always been high on the Seahawks coming into the season because I really, really like the coach. And I get they ain't played nobody. I totally understand that. But I'm willing to be a little high on the Seahawks just because I like the talent. I think Geno Smith, he threw a couple interceptions last week. But if you watch Geno Smith play in and play out, he's playing like he did 2 years ago. I think he's really taken to the scheme. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be a star for them when he has to. Look, they weren't in a passing script last week. They won 24-3. But I think that this receiver trio is awesome, and I think their defense is going to be really, really good. I know they haven't played anybody. I get it, but this Seahawks team to me is a playoff team. I think they're going to make it. I think Mike McDonald's going to have a real coach of the year argument by the end of the year. So I'm fine. I think the thing is I don't read anybody else's power rankings. I don't really know if I'm high on the Seahawks, if I'm in the middle of the ground, whatever. But having the Seahawks up at 10 after they've beat nobody, I'm fine with that because I'm buying in. Even though they haven't beat anybody, I'm buying in on this Seahawks team being really, really good this year.
I'm not. Look, I want to. I want to.
That was quick. Just.
I think we've seen a Seahawks team that has played Jacoby Brissett. They've played Bo Nix and they've played Skylar Thompson. So now we're going to see them play the Detroit Lions, and I think we'll know a lot more. I do think they're going to be a good team. I think that 3-0. I don't think they're going undefeated through the year, but I think when they play the Lions, look, they're facing the Lions at a relatively good time for the Seahawks because defensive end Marcus Davenport's going to be out. Center Frank Ragnow's dealing with a torn pec. It's kind of unclear how much he'll be able to do. I do think, though, that the Lions are going to be the toughest challenge they faced by far this season, but I think that the Seahawks are ready for that. And so I think that this will be a great temperature game for them of hey, are we 10 games good? Are we 12 games good? 12 wins, I should say, good? Are we actually going to contend in the playoffs or just contend to get to the playoffs?
They're going to compete in that game. They're going to compete. And that is code for the dabblers out there. They're going to keep this game close. I do not see the Seahawks getting blown out. And you know how highly I think of the Lions this year. I think the Seahawks are going to hang with them on Monday night.
I think that it's, in my mind, it's fair to say, hey, if the Seahawks win this game or they have an epic, this is an epic game of the ages, then I think, yes, the Seahawks are legit and we look at all of it. I wouldn't be surprised if they won. I wouldn't be surprised if they lost by 20. I just don't know at this point. To watch them struggle the way they did against the Patriots, still in my mind a little bit. I know Gerard Mayo's guys are plucky, but that was an ugly game that could have gone the other way. So it just, I think I need to see it before I can buy into it. So give me after that game, and I'll be either all in or I will be able to stand up and say, I told you. So we talked Commanders earlier. You moved them up 10 spots for beating a woeful Bengals defense. What are we doing here? What are we doing?
I know this was my excitement about the Commanders getting a little bit too much.
They outscored Joe Burrow's offense. Calm down,
look, I'm just kind of buying in on this Jayden Daniels thing. I am really, really excited for what's to come. And you can make an argument that should maybe even be higher. Who's winning games? They're 2-1 right now. I will say this, though. The reason I didn't move them any higher because week 1 looked bad against the Buccaneers. I get that. Jayden Daniels' first game. Second week, they didn't even score a touchdown against the Giants. Age is a little bit better.
A lot of field goals, though.
A lot of field. They scored on 7 different possessions. Yeah, that ain't bad, even though you're not punching it in.
They just didn't do it touchdowns.
Right. I just I feel that it's fair to have them kind of in the middle of the pack right now.
We got a backup Flacco scoring a touchdown
That was
this week.
awesome.
I mean,
that
that's
deserves
pretty-
at least
that
2
gets you
spots
ranked,
up
yeah.
in the power rankings.
Yeah, and the
I agree
Q-Dog
with that.
dance, the end zone was great. And I'm just feeling this Commanders team. I like this coaching staff. Love the rookie quarterback. We're like, how low am I supposed to have the Commanders? Like, nobody's winning games. Like, there's a bunch of mediocrity in the NFL. At least they're winning.
I think 17 feels about right. I just think, you know, a
right.
10-spot move is, you know, it's aggressive. Maybe you're getting a little confident there, Frank. Maybe a little confidence you didn't have last week.
my backwards.
Confident. I think Frank has been
I've been confident. You don't have to get ready if you stay ready, and I have been confident on my Washington Commanders. Let's not make any mistake about that.
I'm confident that Will Levis sucks, which I think I remind everybody on every single show we talk about. The Titans have slipped from 29 to 32. They take the bottom of the barrel. This was hard. What makes the Titans the worst team in the NFL to you, Frank?
And it was hard. I'm interested to see who you guys think is the worst team in the NFL, who you would have had at 32. Because when you go through it, you say, well, the Panthers' narrative is totally different now. They're 1-0 with Andy Dalton, and they look actually pretty good. Like, I don't know what to make of the Panthers anymore. Giants, can't be them. They're coming off a win over the Browns. The Broncos probably would have been 32, but they blasted the Buccaneers. It can't be like a Raiders team that's already beat the Ravens. Like, who else would it be? I don't think it's going to be the Jaguars or the Bengals because they're just better than the Titans. The Titans could have beat the Bears week 1. They could have beat the Jets week 2. Will Levis made some bad mistakes. You have to put somebody 32. I was like, I guess it's got to be the Titans, although I really, truly in my heart don't feel like this is the worst team in football, or honestly even close. I think the Titans are going to be a lot better than this, but somebody had to be 32.
Defense is very good.
Exactly. Who would you guys have put at 32 this week?
I mean, here's what I would say. As long as Will Levis is their quarterback, I think that is a fair spot because as we've talked about, he's going to continue losing games. Someone actually pointed out to me that last year, maybe he didn't have the same number of statistical turnovers, but he was making some of these same decisions where it came really close. Like, yeah, he had a certain number of interceptions, but he also had 5 more passes batted down that could have been interceptions.
Plays, yep.
They just happened, turnover-worthy plays that just happened to be dropped. He fumbled 7 times. I think that the reason that I think the Titans have a higher ceiling this year than I will say the New England Patriots is because I think if you put Mason Rudolph in there, he can run, who is Will Levis's backup right now, he can run that offense well enough with Tony Pollard, with some of the weapons he's got, and with a fantastic defense on the other side that they can win some games. The Patriots, I struggle because after seeing what they did against the Jets, I think their offensive line is so dysfunctional that they are not going to be able to win no matter who you put in there as quarterback. And so it's not going to matter if their defense is relatively good because they're just not going to have the offense to even score a little bit for it.
Yeah, I would put the Patriots at 32. Also, Frank, in fairness,
the Patriots won at Cincinnati and could have beaten my number 10 team. They lost in overtime. Like, it's hard for me to put them 32.
I also honestly would not have had a problem. I was bracing for the power rankings to come out to have my beloved Raiders at 32.
It would have been earned. They won at Baltimore.
They played one good quarter at Baltimore. They were down by 10 in the fourth quarter. Like they got absolutely outmanned week 1. They got absolutely destroyed week 3. They played one good quarter of football. Like, I love the team. They played one good quarter. So I wouldn't have a hard time with them being 32. I also think
it says something. It does say something that we sit here, we can't tell anybody who the worst team in football is definitively. I don't know.
It's almost like it's only been 3 weeks of the season.
That too. But it's just been so crazy at the bottom and the top. Like, we always talk about the top and, oh my God, the 49ers are 1-2 and the Bengals and the Jaguars. The bottom's the same way. That, like, the gap between the bottom and the top of the NFL has probably never been smaller. I mean, there's even if you're one of the quote unquote 5 worst teams in football, you still played at least relatively well at some point this season, really. So it's been a crazy season again at the top and the bottom.
We can't tell you who the worst
you put
team.
The Raiders at 25.
They beat the Ravens. I know.
In Baltimore,
good quarter, but
in Baltimore,
like that is a.
Look,
if I'm the NCAA tournament,
I've turned it around. I'm back on it.
This is an analysis for a point in time that will change next week, and we will continue to assess then.
The one thing we don't know is who the worst team is. The one thing we do know is that whoever that worst team is will pick first overall, and it won't help their franchise very much. That's what we've identified on Inside Coverage. Thursday night football matchup. Jori, you're going to be there. It should be noted, we have picked all of the games. Frank has picked correctly 3 times, thrice. Jori and I are tied for second with 1 correct pick. Dallas at New York, the Giants are
tied for first losers, which we actually learned it's better to be second than to be first. So Frank, good luck saving the franchise.
All I'm seeing here is that Frank is in second to last in this contest, and we're in second place. So the Giants
are third to last, actually.
Well, I mean, we're tied, you and I. So I mean,
Great. So we're first and second last. And
Okay.
he's third last.
Okay. I'll take that too. She's smarter than I am.
I'm the nerd in the band, remember?
That is fact. So the Giants are 5.5 point underdog in this one against Dallas. Jori, you're going to be there. What do you got your eye on for this one?
I've got my eye on how quickly the Cowboys could start, because this is not just a matter of, momentum. We saw last year the Cowboys came to the Giants. They won 40-0. They got an early lead and they never went away. I think that we have seen that the Cowboys haven't played a close game this year. When they played against the Browns, they got up early and they were able to hold on. And Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence in that pass rush were able to make Deshaun Watson and the offense's life pretty miserable no matter what their offense did. The problem is that the Cowboys defense is so predicated on being able to pass rush that when teams like the Saints and the Ravens have gotten up early on them and neutralized the pass rush, the defense just cannot hold off. The offense ends up not being able to do a lot of its playbook as well, and this game gets out of hand. Now, what's working for the Cowboys is that the Giants do not have the run game that the Saints and the Ravens have. They actually have a runner who has been prone to fumbling, which is something that the Cowboys defense will exploit if possible. But I do think that in order to get right with this game, I think that we thought the Giants were terrible in week 1 and we thought Daniel Jones was terrible, when really he was going against a Brian Flores defense that made CJ Stroud look a lot worse than he tends to be week to week. So I think this Giants team, as someone in the league I was talking to was like, I don't know if the Giants are good, but I don't think they're as bad as we thought we were week 1, or as I thought they were week 1. I would agree with that assessment.
Yeah, Malik Neighbors is freaking awesome. He's already a superstar. Yeah, he's this is a very tough game to pick. I very tepidly will pick the Giants because, like you said, there are things there. Neighbors is so good that he's worth a few points at least. And Devin Singletary has been running it pretty well this season, so they're going to try to get him going. And this Cowboys team is just a mess. I think they would be perfectly happy with a 21-17 win just to get some positive momentum. But the Giants cover the spread, I guess. This is a really, really tough game to call because I don't really trust the Cowboys right now at all. There's such a mess on both sides of the ball. It's tough to pick them, especially late at 5.5 on the road, so I can't do it.
Jori, what's your pick on this one? 5.5 points. What are we thinking?
I think the Cowboys will win by more than 5.5 points, but they'll only do it if they get up early in the first half. If they are trailing at halftime, I don't think they have a chance.
I'm going to give them one more try. I've been on the Cowboys so hard this year.
You can't
I'm giving it one more try.
You can't quit them.
I can't quit them. I'm looking at it just one little more taste of the Cowboys. That's all I need here.
They have a lot of issues. I just think they're playing the Giants, and they've had the Giants number. Dak Prescott has not lost to the Giants. It's like, okay, Malik Neighbors looks really good. Well, Daniel Jones is also probably going to throw an interception to the Cowboys defense while attempting to throw to Malik Neighbors. I think both of those things are going to happen.
I think the Cowboys win by more than 5.5. This feels like a comfortable Cowboys win here. And every week I say that confidently, and Jori and I are on the same page. We lose. So we need to get off the schneid. That's what I know. I also know that Stone is doing God's work behind the scenes. We thank him for all the work he puts into the show. You can follow us on Twitter at Jason Fitz, at Yahoo Schwab, at Jori Epstein. You know all of those things. Be sure to make them nice comments. Frank looks really good this week. No more fat guy comments out there, okay?
No more fat guy comments.
If you listen to this episode, please tell us that you think that Frank Schwab looks like Dan Quinn, and please tweet us a picture of Dan Quinn.
Seriously, Google my name.
I would appreciate that. And shout out to your neighbor George for listening to the show also. There we go.
Yes,
neighbor George. Hey, neighbor George.
We find
leave
these
us a
things
review,
out.
buddy.
Leave us a review. Unless you hate it, in which case, stop listening. No, I'm kidding, George. We love you.
I don't think he hates it. George seems to like the podcast. We love the support.
That's amazing. Yeah, we need everybody listen. Everybody love it. We're back Friday with C-Rob. We appreciate you guys. Jori, travel safe to Dallas or to New York, I guess. Travel safe while watching the Cowboys. We appreciate you guys listening to the show. Have a great week.